Okay, so we started a strategic planning process with the board and actually the general managers last spring. I think it was May I started making the phone calls. We kind of talked about the process in April, and then we kept going. Lots of conversations and engagement. So what we did is we used a little bit of a less traditional strategic planning process. So it wasn't just 8 board members sitting, or 12 board members, or however many are on the board, and just sitting everyone in a room for 8 hours and just discussing what the vision and mission was going to be. This is a soft systems approach that I was using. It's called the Check-in method. And it's, well, it's not, I guess, your traditional way of doing this. This is actually, well documented. It's been around since, I believe, the early 80s, started over in the UK. And so if you think of systems analysis for, say, engineering, that would be a hard system. There's very kind of finite pieces to that. When you do soft systems, that's where you don't have all the answers. Things are complex, things are messy. And what you're trying to do is look at all these systems that come together and make sense of them, and how to positively influence industry in Canada in general. Since that forage industry and the grasslands in Canada, that was how we looked at it. So we had, there's a very set process for this approach, the Check-in model. But so this is how we applied it to CFGA. So we engaged 17 individuals, including board members, general managers, and the executive director. And there was a list of questions that was developed. Those wishing to respond in French were able to do so, but in written, since I don't speak well in French, but I can read it. So there's about 21.5 hours of really in-depth one-on-one conversation. We followed that session up. I took all that information, I put it together, and I created basically a framework. They call it a rich picture, and it's basically a messy picture. All the things that are basically, maybe there's issues, maybe there's opportunities, that sort of thing, all in a picture. And then you work through that process and you create a much neater ideal process. You'll never get to your ideal, but you work towards it. And so we had a follow-up session in August to make sure that everything that I heard and how it was being put together made sense. And that was a great conversation. There was lots of editing to be done. And then submitted the draft strategic plan to the board for feedback in November, and then finalized the draft with any changes that I received, which was actually quite minimal at that point, because everything up until that point had come from the board and the general managers. So there was kind of 2 main parts to this assessment. We had the Check-in soft systems analysis, and then there was another part where it was an organizational assessment. So it was looking at, if you look at the scope of the industry itself, and then what skills and assets does the organization have to support the development of these programs, or supports required for the industry. So it's slightly different than the previous strategic plan. The main one that really has changed, or I guess been added, is the leadership and governance, to really look at having those structures in place and really thought through. And then we have the market development, research, education, and advocacy. Where CFGA really does well is in that education and research standpoint. fairly well on advocacy and fairly well on market development. But once again, there's lots of opportunities to improve. In the spring, what kind of started this process was in the spring, we did a progress report, and I went through and looked at the old strategic plan. And really at that point, most of those targets had been hit. So what had happened was, that the plan had been fulfilled, and it was time to, I guess, push the envelope and get to that next stage. So we have, I'm just going to go through basically the higher level strategy here. And any questions, let me know. So there's the leadership and governance, and the main strategy here is to develop, or I guess the goal is to develop a board culture where strategic visioning is paramount. So to ensure that, the board isn't working on the finite details, that they are working at a very big high level. I heard so many interesting things, things that I don't think get discussed regularly, and that's really, but they are true issues for the industry. And I think sorting and solving those issues is really important. And so I think that's where we want the board to use their best skills. And so we can do this by maintaining and improving governance structures, identifying external factors, so doing an environmental scan regularly, or just, as things bubble up and people hear things from different parts of the industry, and then implementing a dual language plan to connect with producers in both official languages. I put that here. It was in another section. It kind of fits throughout the entire, that one piece fits throughout the entire strategy, but it seems to fit best here. So on market development, that's making sure that there's a market available for forage products, is to strengthen the viability of forage as a value added or commodity product for off-farm sales. And we just ensure that existing and new distribution channels are working reasonably well. We've seen some issues with distribution in the last few years, and it's really an ongoing challenge in agriculture in general. To strengthen the entire value chain, especially at the seed supply level. If you don't have that seed, it makes it more difficult down the line, especially on market development, and identify and manage risks affecting production. So with research, like I said, there's a good body of research, as you'll hear from Dr. Leduc later, around, the different research that we're doing, but to support research relevant to the Canadian forage industry. So basically affecting production, value added, and then also helping where you can manage risks affecting production. So i.e. climate change, that sort of thing. On education, this is probably the one that was rated the highest by the board members, and even from the conference reports and things like that. There was quite a bit already being done once we've been in there, but as Cedric said, Melissa and I both are working on online education degrees, and that's really informing. We're putting our 2 cents in on this. And so just making sure that message gets out there, that the BMPs, that's a really interesting area. It's not quite communications, it's not quite education. And so we need, for BMP adoption, that's an interesting area to work on. But doing it through implementing the conference, as well as developing ongoing and on-demand learning, so people can access that learning any time of day. And we can have the synchronous sessions as well, but making sure that information then lives longer. So advocacy, so that's just building the awareness. That could be to government, it could be to industry, it could be to like other commodity groups even, and it can be to the general public. So basically starting to be more strategic about how we're connecting at the federal, provincial, and municipal levels, and then strengthening the networks across different nonprofit sectors. It's being done quite well. Actually, that part is being done quite well already, but just to be more strategic. So I guess time and resources are being used effectively. And then eventually engage the general public on the value of forages. It's not the most glamorous crop, but it seems to be coming into that public sphere a little bit more now. Grass-fed and all these different terms, buzzwords we're hearing now. So it's about managing that relationship as well, or those messages. So to implement, so we have this strategy now, what do we do with it? We can let it sit on a shelf and get dusty, or we can actually implement. And so what we've done is we have a project management software. So I put this plan into those action items, and the recommendations have gone into that. And then the next steps for the board is to set some priorities. So there's a lot in this plan, and we've had a few subsequent plans come out of that. And we need to make sure that everything rests underneath the strategy, but then also, have accountability and have timeframes. And so not everything can be done, in the next 6 months. This is the last plan, I think, took about 5 years. And the organization got there, and this is for the next 5 years. So having the board really say, these are the most important things. That may change as we move along and things come up. Maybe distribution becomes top priority, or advocacy becomes very high priority. But anyways, strategically putting out those timelines. And then we can allocate those resources, responsibilities, and there's going to be tasks that are very well suited for the people that are on the team already. And there's also some more strategic high level thinking that I was talking about, where the board has to really have a big influence on the direction of where that goes. So I put this in as at the end here to just say this is kind of something that as of late, we've been referring to quite a bit for the organization. Cedric, Melissa, and I have these weekly conversations literally about how the organization
100% connected to PROTHAY.
Oh, and so this is the Eisenhower matrix. I don't know if anyone is familiar with it, but we have this thing, and what happens is lots of times people end up operating in that important, urgent quadrant. And while we do that, and there's always going to be times that you need to do that, we are trying to move as much as possible into the important, not urgent. So we're trying to, plan ahead and have everything, months ahead, thinking through the problem before the problem actually happens. And so we're trying to work in that top left rather than the top right quadrant. So, and that would be, does anyone have any questions on that?
No. No questions. Don't see anything in the chat. Serge says really good work. Thanks, Serge. You were part of it, so good work to you. So that document was part of the invite. If you didn't get it, feel free to reach out. Put your name in the chat or send us an email. We'll get you a copy of that. In terms of ongoing updates on that, Carlene, I think there is a plan to further engage some of the other stakeholder groups to make sure that document remains a living, breathing machine, right?
Yeah, so it was, we looked at the general managers and the board members, but really to get a full scale input from like the entire industry, we should be looking at, maybe industry, maybe there's, the compressed timothy market, or maybe there's just distribution we should be talking to, or seed companies, that sort of thing. So there are opportunities to actually expand that process, maybe in a year or two to go back to it, or have systems in place for ongoing, I guess, information gathering as we go. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to that. Thinking specifically, folks like Jay Hackney is with us today from Forge Genetics International. So glad to have Jay on board. See Tracy Hubert and Janice Bruno, both here from BCRC. Lots of good stuff happening in those shops, and a great chance for us to start to integrate some of our activities to reach more growers. So we'll certainly look forward to engaging some of those other stakeholders as we go. And the other one I want to mention was groups like Glacier Farm Media, a really key partner for CFGA. You're seeing, those regular information pieces in Canadian Cattlemen's Magazine and Country Guide and Le Bulletin, and some other publications as they offer some support for promoting the conference. Also, we've got our Grassland Guide that's published twice a year as well in those publications. So making sure that we're aligning our goals with those other partners and stakeholders is critical. So we'll continue to move that forward. Grant, comment here. Okay, Garrett, research quickly disseminated by CFGA wants to do forefront efforts. Thoughts on that, Grant? Do you want to share a few comments on how we can incorporate that into our thought process here?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, there you go.
Okay, no, just the exciting work that's getting done, and I really like seeing it in Glacier Media because it's presented in a sensible form for others to take home. It's just that we need more of that, and the CFGA Research and Extension Committee has voiced concerns about the latest research occurring in forages not being present in a large enough volume to strategic leaders across the field to work with CFGA to take the newest information forward in ways that producers are following and being part of that.
Okay, that came out of the conversation yesterday with the Research and Extension Committee.
Well, it's been an ongoing one as some of the resources were pulled together from across the country of what research was being done in the past of part of our goals that Richard and Christine were creating for us over time.
Yeah, Maxine was part of that original process as well. Yeah, an ongoing issue, I guess, to catalog some of that research and find those linkages. So let's make a note of that, Carlene and Grant. That's something we should definitely be putting back on the agenda with the research and extension team as we met yesterday. So